We're live, Chair.
So,
Perfect. Thank you, Mark, and welcome members. Sorry, Councillor Barnes, did you say anything?
yeah, I was just saying if neither of them turn up, we won't have a lot. It will be quite a short meeting, won't it?
It's going to be a short meeting, but let's see. Members, welcome to the Strategy and Performance Scrutiny Board. It's really marvellous to see so many of you here today. On to the first item of the agenda, substitutes and apologies. Diana, Mark?
Yeah, it's Diana. Mark was just setting us off, but thank you. We've got Becky's just coming into the meeting now. Councillor Ford is supposed to be subbing for Councillor Thornber, but obviously not here yet. Councillor Kimber is substituting for Councillor Megan Swift. And we have apologies from Councillor Thornber and Councillor Megan Swift.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor Dan Sutherland is struggling to get in. He's just sent a message.
Perfect. In that, can we invite him in or anything, or can
I'll send him the codes. I've still got them on my clipboard.
Oh, thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Perfect. We'll get him in. Item number 3. Admission of the public. We are live on the airwaves. Item number 4, minutes of the last meeting held on the 10th of January.
Sorry, Chair, did you do item 2, members' interests?
Oh, no, sorry. You are quite on the ball. And that was a test. That was a test.
Board is now coming in as well.
You passed with flying colours.
Thank you.
Let's not be so hasty in this meeting. Item number 2, members' interest. Does any member have any interest about anything being discussed this evening? No. Okay. Well, if you do, you can also declare it before you speak. Okay, we've done item number 3. Item number 4, minutes of the last meeting held on 10th of January. Are there any comments on those minutes at all? No. In that case, can I propose them as a true and accurate record? Can we have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Barnes. All those in favour? Okay, and that's passed in the meeting. Item number 5, deputations. Now, Ben, over to you on this one. I think you've got something to say.
Yes, we received a deputation, Chair, but we received it at approximately 5:05 this evening. It's quite a detailed document. It's from Family Voice, Calderdale. I've said that deputation can't come into the meeting because obviously it's considerably later than it should have been here. What I have agreed, however, is that I will circulate it to all Scrutiny Board members tomorrow morning, and I will also circulate it to as it relates specifically to an item in the budget to do with children's services. I'll also send it to the Chair and Deputy Chair of the CYP Scrutiny Board, and I'll make sure that Becky gets a copy and Julie Jenkins gets a copy in the morning, so it can be included in the consultation process.
Yeah, that is absolutely fine. Any comments on that, members? No. Very good. Very good. Okay, then. On to the items of substance, the cabinet budget proposals. Now, what I suggest for this item is that you'll see in front of you this evening, you have a nice and shiny report. Now, that report is a consequence of your efforts in attending 2 meetings, the first in December and then the second on, I think it was the 23rd of January. And following those meetings, the scrutiny officers typed up what was discussed into the report that you've got in front of you. So we're going to do things differently in this meeting. And what I propose that we do is, first of all, we go through that report paragraph by paragraph, so you can comment on those paragraphs, and you can also, maybe if you've got anything which you want to flesh out in that report or anything that you want changing, then we can do that. Or indeed, if you want to ask an officer or Councillor Dacre about anything on the back of that report, you can do so. And then the second part of this session, what I propose is that we ask questions, or we have a discussion with Becky and Councillor Dacre about anything which is not in the report, and anything indeed which you think should be put in the report. Members, is that okay? Is that agreed? Is that acceptable? I think then we'll cover our basis. Okay, good. So let's turn to the report. Page 1 and page 2. It's actually just page 1. We've got the introduction. Members, are there any comments at all on the introduction at all? I don't imagine so, but anything on the introduction? Nope. Page 2, executive summary and recommendations. First of all, we start with the process. Is there anything within this page, the process of how we've gone about doing this, and indeed the budget process? Are there any comments from members? No. In that case, the first recommendation on page 2, we recommend that Cabinet bring forward the process of publishing the budget proposals and the scrutiny of those proposals to November for consideration of the 25-26 budget. Any comments on that? No. Second one, we recommend that considerably more detail is provided in the initial report detailing the budget proposals. Any comments on that recommendation? Yeah, Councillor Carney?
Yeah, I mean, would it be worth sort of like mention what I think we might benefit from in under the heading extra detail or whatever?
Yeah, Becky?
Thanks, Chair. I think for the purposes of a meaningful recommendation, following on from what Councillor Kearney said, I said, do you mean as part of the future budget process?
Yeah.
Is that a recommendation to incorporate into future budget setting processes, as opposed to the final budget report that Council considers?
Well, I mean, I suppose it's maybe a bit too late to add more detail to the existing one, but you know, going forward, probably from the next time that it happens, then you know, maybe a bit more detail would be useful. I don't know whether other members have anything in mind that they would like to see.
I think let's bring in Mike at this point.
Thank you, Chair. I think the intention of the way we worded that recommendation was for future years, not for this year's process. It was a recommendation into the future year's process, as I think Becky was suggesting.
Yeah. In that case, I think we can just note in the minutes that it's our intention that it's for future budget processes, for there to be more detail in the report. I am conscious on that recommendation that it's like, you know, when you're scrutinising data, one of the things you say is, well, we need more data here, and I'm very conscious about that line. You know, how much detail is enough detail, you know, but perhaps in future we can help inform that process closely. Councillor Barnes?
Yeah, Chair, I think there's a legitimacy here, because obviously when we're being asked to look at a budget with no detail and provisions, the immediate question is why no savings this year? Why the savings in subsequent years and not in this year? These are valid questions, and without that detail, we can't ask those questions at scrutiny meetings. So I think having no detail, it actually is not good. And I accept your point is how much detail is required, but I'd like to have some detail, some idea, some basic premise as to what we're agreeing here. Because if you look at commissioning, and what do we commission? 100 million a year, and we're talking about a 0.5% saving. So I think it is also beholden. We need to recommend to those scrutiny committees that fit within the commission structure, such as adults and CYP, that they need to be asking these questions throughout the year as to what impact they'll have on their and what is the long term, the long term impact. What projections have been made? So for example. If you look at the youth services, what projections have been made as to what's going to happen in 3 years, 4 years' time by reducing the youth services by 100,000. But I think it's beholden upon us to recommend to scrutiny committees that they need to, during the course of this the next municipal year, to be on top of this like a rash.
Yeah, a good rash, constructive rash. Becky.
Thanks, Chair. Just to say that the essence of that recommendation chimes with some of the feedback that we've been getting in the wider consultation in terms of ideas on how to make the presentation of the overall budget more clearer. So for all stakeholders to kind of understand and understand the context and everything. So we will be taking on board that additional feedback from the wider consultation also in this, so that recommendation will dovetail into how we present the overall financial position and budget and so there's a better clarity.
Agreed. And of course on the back of that, the first recommendation about bringing the timeline forward also supplements this point about detail as well. I think that's a fair comment. Okay, recommendation number 3. We recommend that quality impact assessments are prepared for all of the budget proposals and published in advance of full council on the 26th of February. Any comments from members or Becky or Councillor Dacre? Becky?
Yeah, again, just to clarify in terms of I guess from a budget setting point of view, the full council is setting the budget for 24-25 primarily. So we would be focusing on the quality impact assessments for those savings for that year, because as we've said, there are some other savings in future years that will be subject to further options, analysis, review, consultation, where there'll be full quality impact assessments that go alongside that for future years. So I guess is whether there's anything more specific that's required for the 24-25 changes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Dacre.
Thank you. I suppose I'd just say that we might want to think carefully about whether we actually wanted to produce full impact equality assessments. If we think of the number of those of savings there were this year, if you were to have a full impact equality assessment appended for each of those, you're going to have a mountain of documents, and I suspect it might be better to have a summary for the immediate impact in the year as described by Becky rather than the full document. Otherwise, I think you'd just find people would drown in the data. And if you have more time to scrutinise, then there's more opportunity to say, well, this is the risk assessment, but can you tell us more about that particular risk assessment, rather than everybody being bombarded with the whole lot of them.
Yeah, some more of a summary. Councillor Barnes?
Yeah. For clarity, are we saying that the full ones will be done, but all that will be released will be the summary ones, and that if we want to take more detail, then we could get the full ones, or are you just going to do a summary one across the piece? I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, Becky, I think might want to come in on this. I know that Nigel's view was that full assessment should not be done until you knew which options were being taken. This year, there have been much fuller assessments, and I think probably my expectation would be that they would be done in the background, but you wouldn't provide every one. You would provide a summary, and then you could ask about particular ones, and it might be that you would ask to see the full one in a particular case, and it could be shown it as long as there's no reason not to, which I can't imagine what that reason would be. But
thank you. It was just clarification I wanted.
Yeah.
That was all. Just as to the process. I wasn't asking for the full ones or whatever.
No,
I just wanted to understand.
Yeah. The only other thing I'd say is, I suppose the one reason that some might not be able to be is if they did have implications for individuals.
Yeah, Becky.
Yeah, just to clarify, that the fuller quality impact assessments have been carried out across the services, and as with kind of usual process, they're available for members to view, but they wouldn't normally be published in full with decision reports, and so that's why we've only with the cabinet report and on the budget consultation website, we only publish the summary equality impact assessments for and like I said, because the focus was on the decisions directly for the 24-25 budgets, there may be some that require more detail as we get into considering the 25-26 savings, such as the council tax reduction scheme.
Councillor Carney?
Yeah, there's just a bit of comment provoked by like the impact assessments only being done for the things that are going to happen. But I would have liked to have thought that impact assessments on things that were in the mix that may or may not be actually become a thing would need to get done, because it would be part of the decision making process. And then if that impact influences the decision, then it might mean that something that something doesn't make it in, and it looks to get kept as is or improved because of the outcome of the impact assessment. And then obviously then that might be behind the scenes when the final report's produced, because it's not happening, but it would be there to be published along. If an impact assessment was done and then that item became part of the report and part of the recommendation, then it would be available to us or somebody that wanted to know.
Right. Councillor Dacre?
I've just put in chat, I think the point was, I was saying that that's what Nigel's view was, and as you've just heard, that's not what happens now. They are produced, it's just they're not disclosed in full at this stage routinely.
Yes, so they are done, they're just not. So, Mike?
Chair, a couple of things. One is, given that myself and Ben and Libby drafted this document fairly quickly after the seminars, normally I would stay quiet during a meeting, but if there's anything that I hope you'd allow me to come in when it's about how we've drafted things and comments on that. So I'll come back on that in a minute. Just to say that if you approve the recommendation slightly later on to have a look at the process once it's finished at your next meeting in March, then it's an opportunity perhaps to discuss some of these things in depth after the event and make recommendations into the future process, so that these things can be more thoughtfully thought about once we've got past the 26th of February council meeting. I mean, Becky contacted me earlier today, and I think I went back through all the proposals, and nearly all of the proposals have got equality impact assessments. I would say that the 4 growth proposals don't have, and whilst some of them it's fairly obvious that there's little or no impact, that it could be that growth proposals in future have either a positive impact in terms of equality impact, or may still have a, you know, be disproportionately favouring one part of the community rather than another. But I suppose my view, having drafted the recommendation, is this is something to look at as much for future years as for February the 26th. Thank you.
So I'm slightly confused, if you don't mind me saying. Do we need to then amend this recommendation? Because this recommendation specifically mentions to be published in advance of the full council meeting on the 26th of February. Do we then need to amend that recommendation just to allude to future years?
Chair, I think actually, from what I'm hearing, the assessments are done.
Yeah.
So that actually the recommendation is complete. From if I'm reading what I'm being told correctly, the question is that right, Becky?
Yeah, I think the summaries were done. The detailed ones were done, and the summaries were then created from the detailed ones, and the summaries were published with the original cabinet proposals. Like you say, there's some that were done at a very high level, such as the commissioning ones, because until the service goes through the detail of each, you know, each contract that gets commissioned, then the EIA is done at the time. So it was a high level one. So in the main, where it was sort of really specific options, then there is a summary that was published in the cabinet alongside the cabinet report last time, which would, you know, will remain available in advance of full council.
Yeah, I'm satisfied with that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike.
Sorry, Chair. Just to say, we'll amend that. We'll amend that recommendation in line with the discussion.
Yeah, that's grand. Thank you, Mike. Councillor Kingston.
Sorry, I just want to check. It mentions in particular the paragraph changes to the council tax reduction scheme seem likely to have equalities implications. Has there been an equality impact assessment published for that aspect of the proposals?
Is it Councillor Dacre?
Well, this is one of those where you can't really do that because we don't know what the review is going to come up with. It would be an entirely hypothetical, if we did this, then it might be that, or if we do that, it might be this. So I don't think it'd be impossible to do a meaningful, in detail equality impact assessment at this stage. The stage that's going to be useful to people at is after the review has been done and a proposal is put forward.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, good. Mike and the team are going to tweak the wording, so it's reflective. On to the next recommendation. We consider that further detailed conversations need to be held with NHS partners to fully understand the impact of the proposed savings, and we recommend that those conversations are held before full council on the 26th of February. Now, this might have already happened, but I'm interested for thoughts and opinions. Councillor Dacre?
Well, I'll wait to see if any members have any views, but what I can say is that both Becky and I know that those meetings are ongoing, and indeed really have been ongoing for some considerable time, even prior to the publication of the proposals, whatever else has been said. They are not necessarily going to be tidily concluded before budget council, but they are ongoing and they are difficult, but our side is relatively clear that there will be a positive outcome, but although it may take quite a while to get that negotiation completed.
Right, Mike.
Well, I know that there have been behind the scenes discussions about whether there should be discussion, not publicly through the Health and Wellbeing Board, but through the Health and Wellbeing Board mechanisms in the future, not about whether the schemes are included in the council's budget proposals, but around the implications for implementation. So, in a sense, the comments that members raised previously in the workshops have led to some discussions that I've not been party to, because I'm not senior enough to be party to, but I have observed. So I think there's some discussion going on about how this will be taken on in the future. Does that make sense? Sorry, perhaps I'm being a bit oblique there.
So I think Councillor Sutherland.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up on something that was a bit later down in the report, but we don't have it as a recommendation. It relates to this one. It was about the comments from the COO at Calderdale Cares about the importance of joint commissioning between the health sector and the local government sector for local VCS organisations. So I wanted to flag that up as something we may already be doing, something we may want to recommend is done, is for the council and NHS to think collectively about how it maintains a healthy VCS sector within Calderdale, as two of the prime sources of funding, even in the impact of us having to make cuts.
So it'll be in some ways a supplementary recommendation in some ways. Councillor Dacre?
Yes, I mean, it's a real live issue because the voluntary sector is increasingly relied upon as local government has been losing money, but of course some of the money that the voluntary sector rely upon is money from us, and that's becoming quite a challenging relationship. I think most members may be aware that we are, as a council, we're undertaking a review of our relationship with the voluntary sector, and that a lot of that is around the issue of commissioning. How we do it, how we treat them as equal partners. We don't try to get things done on the cheap, how we help give stability and some security as much as we can in the sector. And that's taking quite a while to do. But I suppose I'd offer the reassurance that although it's taking a little while, when the peer review group came back to see us, they said that they were pleased that we were actually trying to reset and create this new relationship carefully and not just rushing into it, so that we could say that when a peer review group came back, look, we've done this. I would say that the concern that's around that issue, I think we are trying our best to deal with it as well as we can, given all of the straitened circumstances, etc.
I mean, we could still put it in as a recommendation, can't we? If Councillor Sutherland's agreeable to that, I certainly don't have any issues with that. Mike, in that case, could you or Ben could you make a note of that, and we'll feed it into the finalised recommendations. Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay then, as stated above, this is a new way of overview and scrutiny considering cabinet budget proposals, and we recommend that strategy and performance scrutiny bring it to the meeting on March the 2024, or rather review the process. I should imagine everyone will be agreeable to that. Councillor Carnett?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, there's something that because the paragraph above that talks about like detail to do with sort of like savings and investments and whatnot. Like the the recent announcement by the government that they were going to sort of distribute £500–600 million amongst all the councils sort of provoked me to look at the reserve spending, and that was after the the scrutiny session. So I had noticed that, and there was documents that sort of gave detail on various parts of the budget, and where there was earmarked reserve spending involved, there was a figure, but not all of them had that. So I started looking, around other reports, and I couldn't see, similar detail. So, for example, on one of the sheets, it said in the chief executive sort of pot, there was an earmarked 282,630 going to get spent, and resources and transformation, there was 147,500, and that was listed, for each year. But obviously this year the 4.7 has been told that we're going to get spent. But is there going to be any detail on, what that whole 4.7 is made up of? Because I can't account for, 4.27 of them, because they're earmarked spending. And I'm hoping that Becky and Councillor Dacre might be able to, provide a bit more information. But as a council, we're only finding out about our share of that £500–600 million. The figures I've heard are just under 2 million. It might be getting 1.9 or something. So I was looking for sort of a wee bit of information on if any of the things that the government's telling us, right, we're giving you this money and it's specifically to spend on, this stuff, like adult social care and whatnot, that if any of the reserves, the earmarked reserves, are going to be spent on that, how are we going to deal with that? Are we going to keep the amount spending as is, and then if it turns out there's an underspend, that would enable, things going back into the reserves? Or are we going to adjust things so that we know that we're definitely spending what the government's given us this year, because it's for this year only, and it needs to get spent on X, Y, and Z? So anywhere where that matches what we're paying in, does that now allow us to decide to reduce the amount that's coming in out of reserves? So it's just to really, I suppose that's two things in, isn't it? It's what are all the reserves getting spent on, and is the money come from the government going to be able to change how we manage that? Thanks.
Absolutely. Becky?
Thanks, Chair. Just to answer kind of part of that question, and I'll bring Councillor Dacre in for the rest. So one of the kind of things that have been sort of identified as an area of improvement in terms of how we kind of look at our overall financial resilience and is to kind of make improvement in the way that we present our reserves, having more focus on what is our strategy for reserves, and having a greater transparency. So tried to sort of change the way that we presented that, but I've not fully achieved everything that I would like to achieve in terms of the way that's presented. So I can understand Councillor Kearney, kind of where you've tried to make sense of it. So there's different kinds of reserves that we hold. Obviously there's the unusable reserves, and I think we've tried to make that clear, and that's just sort of accounting adjustments. And then there's our usable reserves, which fall into three main areas, and one of those areas is earmarked for use within services, and that's usually either it can be grants that are able to be carried forward and used for specific things, and they're carried forward in a reserve, and then that's budgeted for in services, or money that's come in or put aside for a specific thing, again to be used in services. And that's where you'll see the amounts budgeted to be funded by reserves at a service level So Councillor Kearney, the two examples that you gave, that's where those services are planning in budget terms to meet some of their budgeted expenditure by those reserves that they've got earmarked to use. And then we've got ring fence reserve that are such as the public health grant suite, and again that will be determined in line with that grant. And then we've got the corporate reserves that are generally used to cover risks that we identified, and that's where we're sort of trying to identify within our reserve strategy of what those sorts of risks are, and they're sort of that, you know, the unpredicted things where that, you know, the budget plans may not go to plan because of the things that we know that are in the risk profile. So that's where the category of how we use our reserves to smooth and balance the budgets, you know, in that intervening period. So those corporate reserves, partly to you know, to help with our financial sustainability and get us to where we need to get to in the short term, and then partly for covering risks. And that's where we say that we don't, you know, sort of we keep an eye on not using those reserves. So those three categories, and you know, tried to sort of present it all in a way that was more meaningful. That so there's probably more that we can do to improve the understanding, and that's something that maybe Scrutiny can look at in future to sort of understand, you know, the sorts of things that are in service reserves and what the earmarked for, where they've come about, and how they're planned to be used, and then how we look at the risk reserve and the corporate reserves, and you know, understanding that risk and resilience. So that's maybe something that the Scrutiny might want to look at in the future. In terms of the additional funding, we got the final settlement on Monday, and the impact of that, the additional social care grant is about 1.9 million, and that will be incorporated into the final budget report considered by Cabinet, and that basically closes the gap that we had originally. So, you know, my recommendation would be that reduces the call on using reserves to smooth the gap. So that'll be all kind of going into the final report for Cabinet to consider on Monday.
Is it okay if I just asked a quick follow-up?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. So I didn't want to mention this in case, you know, it was part of your answer, but I was on a local government course in the last couple of weekends, and I learned a new word, environment, which they told me was the movement of funds earmarked for one service being passed to another. So like all this money that's coming in, would that enable something like that to happen? And then and then the actual money that came in, that could definitely be spent on what the government says it must be spent on. But then money that we were already using before we had that, would that then be able to sort of like transfer from one, you know, like service to another, or some money transferred from one service to another to mitigate something else? So the example that's coming to my mind would be, you know, could it be used? Could a mechanism like that be used to say mitigate the, you know, the planned cuts to council tax relief next year?
So Becky want to come back in on that?
Yeah, if I couldn't just respond to that, Councillor Robinson.
Yeah.
So I guess in terms of the use of environment generally is moving budgets between services. So the way that our budget is presented, we end up with our net revenue expenditure made up of all of our service costs, and usually that environment means either moving money between service budgets between themselves or between services. The money that's coming in from government settlement is funding, so that creates the envelope of money by which we create the net revenue expenditure. So we wouldn't necessarily wire money from funding to services it's the quantum. So that just enables us to say this is the quantum of services. So we've already, in our budget proposals, we've already kind of said that we need to spend the 213 million on services, and including the use of reserves. So that funding just reduces the reliance on reserves. So maybe there's a more detailed conversation using some examples on some spreadsheets that we could go through another time, Councillor Kearney, if that would help.
Councillor Dacre?
Yes, so just to follow on from what Becky said about that, you've heard what her recommendation is. Obviously, Cabinet get together and decide what they want to go in the budget that goes to Cabinet on Monday. And when we do that, we'll be taking account of all consultation, both from members, from the public, from the groups that are consulted with, and so on. And if we want to change the consultation budget, we obviously, just like opposition groups would have to put their budget past Becky, so would we if we made any changes. So that's all I can really say at the moment. It's a political decision as to whether we want to make any changes, but ultimately it's always subject to the approval of the head of finance.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Nope. Very good. Okay, then on to the next one. So we are still on page 3, and we're going to go on to the recommendation under scrutiny boards. It says, we recommend that a report on the young person supported housing project care leavers scheme is considered by CYP scrutiny board early in the municipal year 24-25, so that members can fully examine the benefits of the scheme for care leavers and monitor progress on implementation. I don't imagine there's any criticism of that at all, but are there any comments? Nope. Very good. Next one.
Chair, can I just go back a second?
Yeah, Councillor Barnes, fire away.
And it's not about this. I'm just looking at the previous paragraph, which I'm not sure that there should have been a recommendation there about the fact that, that actually, these details should be brought up to scrutiny, because it's not really. It seems to imply that it should, but it isn't a recommendation. So I just don't know whether or not we're allowed to tweak, amend, or add to this to say that that's a recommendation that this board feels should have, is that those proposals that are being considered are presented to the appropriate scrutiny boards. Because it implies stroke infers. I can never get somebody smarter than me will tell me what the difference between implies and infers are, and there's enough people in this room to do that. But it implies infers a recommendation, but it doesn't actually recommend. Does that make sense? So,
a man of riddles tonight.
Well, to be honest with you, unfortunately, the grammar person in this house isn't allowed on these meetings because she's in another room. But there we go. Apparently, you imply, what was it? All right, yeah, we'll move on.
What was that? I'm quite intrigued.
I'm being barracked by my wife, George.
No, I'm being corrected. Okay, well, we can build in a recommendation. Mike,
would it be clearer if the report said that the appropriate scrutiny boards should consider during 24-25 those proposals that are being implemented for future years? I mean, we'll get better word in that, but basically you want to make sure, I believe, Councillor Barnes, we've covered all the schemes that come in 25-26 and 26-27, rather than just one or two that we've picked out. If members are happy with that, we can build that in.
I think that's fine, yeah. It's quite wide as well. Good. It's good spots. Thank you, Lynn. Next one. We recommend that throughout the municipal year 2024-25, Place Scrutiny Board should have regular items on the impact and legacy of the year of culture. And I'm pleased that we've got Councillor Dickinson here this evening. Place Scrutiny Board should also consider on the contribution that the Peace Hall makes to Calderdale and its economic impact alongside the impact of other budget proposals on the cultural offer in the borough. Does Councillor Dickinson, as our distinguished place chair, do you have any comments on this at all? Are you indeed okay to have this on your panel?
Yes, it's certainly items that we would like to consider for the for our work program, assuming that I'm appointed as chair for the next municipal year, which I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, and I very much say that I hope to be. We had an item on the year of culture beforehand. It would be good to scrutinise that in terms of its various impacts, both cultural, economic, and social, going forward. And similarly, with regard to that of the Peace Hall and its wider economic magnetic effect, I suppose, as well. See if that's still being carried forward. So yeah, definitely items that I think would be of great interest to Place Scrutiny.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Any comments, members? I think it's a fair recommendation. Okay, on to the next ones. The next one, I think it's more commentary. The next stages of the report. So I'm going to take it under the subheadings of. So the first one is a sustainable. Councillor Barnes.
Sorry, check out. I just wanted to raise my hand when you go. You do your opening bit, and I'll have a question on this part. That's all.
All right, so it's like a.
I was just getting. I forget Colin Hutchinson isn't on these meetings, and you normally have to put your hand up really dead early to get ahead of Colin on any meeting. So that was all.
So, that's okay. We go. What is it? Tortoise and the hare. That's what I believe in. A sustainable budget. Any comments? Councillor Barnes. There you go.
As if by magic, Chair. As if by magic. How did you know that I wanted to raise a subject on it? Thank you, Chair. I think, obviously, if we've looked at the cabinet papers, we'll see that the overall position is quite similar, around about 10 million, isn't it? But the quarter 3 outturn shows something like a 3 million worsening in adults, doesn't it? From quarter 2. How has that impacted upon this part of it? Has there been, because obviously, there's a big transformation plan coming from adults, and obviously that will be brought in front of adult scrutiny as and when I think it's due in February. I think it's due at the next meeting. But obviously that's a big impact upon the sustainability of this budget. I just wondered how that quarter 3 outturn has had any impact upon this at the moment.
Yeah, Councillor Dacre.
Well, perhaps if you want to take Becky first, because it's more about the technicalities of.
Yeah.
Refers in that paper to the straight line between the two, so perhaps Becky's better answering.
Yeah, that's fine. Becky.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I guess in terms of going back to the overall resilience and sustainability of the overall budget, that in the future, with the savings proposals and the consideration of prudent assessment of where we need to provide for additional growth item and price increases, etc. we factored all those in the context of then when we come on to our reserve strategy, understanding where the risks are, and those risks currently going forward are still within the social care aspect. So we have increased the adults budget for next year quite significantly to take account of some of those risk factors. The additional outturn forecast that's happened at quarter 3 compared to quarter 2, I guess it just confirms that there are those risk factors in there, and you know, that's why I kind of recommending that we use the funding to swap with use of reserves. So we have got those reserves to cover the future risks as we go into 24-25. So although there is a clear strategy in place for adults transformation and the areas of focus that's going to play into, as we're seeing, you know, there is a sort of a bit of a time lag between, you know, the impact of that coming through on use of resources. So that you know, that's the sort of position I would say that we are excited on the risks, and that's why, you know, that we know that we need to not use all of our reserves to balance the budget, but given that is happening, that, you know, that's the recommendation. But we have increased the adults budget going forward into next year quite significantly, so it, you know, it's one of those areas that it is difficult to predict in terms of some of the care packages and the costs, and that's always been the case.
Yeah. Any comments in response, Councillor Barnes?
Yeah, so I didn't know whether Councillor Dacre was going to come in there, but okay. I think there is some concern. I think the concern, and I think it leads into other areas as well, is obviously the difference between stat and non-stat. How much non-statutory we're doing in social care, for example, and then the impact that has, as it lists in there, where sometimes it's not directly stat, but it has an impact upon that. And I think we need to be making sure that this year, that when these proposals are coming into the scrutiny boards, whatever scrutiny board they're coming into, is we're assessing that and seeing whether or not, you know, we're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, or even worse, we're not saving a pound today to spend £100 in 2 years' time. I think he's beholden upon us to be going through those processes. So that's really just what I want to say. That more a comment than a question, if I'm being honest. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Dacre?
Well, perhaps I don't need to say anything since he says it wasn't a question. I suppose I'd just say that I think a lot of the focus in adults is because we cannot control some of the things that are going on there. We can't necessarily control how many people require the statutory services, but what we can try to control, for instance, is that we are not paying for care that is it's the responsibility of the NHS to care for. So that's a clear example of where we can, in theory, free up money from our budget that we are using now that actually should be coming from somebody else's budget. So there are certainly things like that can happen, mostly actually in adults, because those overlaps and those linkages between the health service and ourselves and healthcare and social care don't really exist the same, even in children's. So there is some scope, and that's the sort of thing that, yes, as the transformation in adults goes forward, there should be some benefit from that. The risk is that it just gets swallowed, in the sense that there are more people with more complex disabilities living longer. And although part of what adults are doing is trying to ensure that we give people tailored care that is what they want and not more than they need, and therefore costing more than they want or need, it's still, there's some very complex needs out there to be dealt with, and there's going to be more of them in the future. And again, it's something, I think the transformation projects within adults are something that clearly the relevant boards will be looking at throughout the year. And I think from the conversations and the meetings I've been at with adults, I think that members would feel reassured that there's some excellent work going on in there, and they're not going to let go of that transformation process.
Yeah. Can I just come back? Can I just come back on that?
Because yeah, whilst we're on a roll, then we'll bring it to council.
Yeah, I mean, Hathersage is half full. You know, we've got, it's meant to be there. It's designed for 6 weeks. We've got residents staying there for 12 months and not paying for that period. But it's half full. And I know this is not maybe not the appropriate, but you know, this needs to go to adults, and the questions need to be asked is why it's half full. Because if it was full and on a 6-week rotation, or we were charging residents for it, then we wouldn't. You know, that's a significant saving. So it is a point we need to look at and continue to go forward. If it is such a useful service, it's half full. Thank you, Chair.
No, yeah, and noted. Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if this is quite the right time to say this, and you can always move me on.
No.
But it's kind of linking to what Mike said.
Councillor Carr has frozen for me.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was just me. But
okay. Yeah, it's one of those.
It's well-timed internet breakdown. Sorry, poorly timed internet breakdown.
It seems like we've got a technical glitch. So we'll move on, and we'll bring Councillor Carr in at a later stage when we've sorted out this glitch. Are there any other questions on a sustainable budget? No. In that case, a priority-led budget is the next paragraph. Anything, members? No. Councillor Carney?
Yeah, thanks. So if I can indulge in sort of talk about this and miss out the thriving towns bit and move on to and sort of like talk about the inequalities as well. So like the thing that I sort of raised a concern about was, you know, like the council tax reduction scheme, which is happening. Well, if nothing changes, that can take it off, you know, take it out. If there's no positive changes, then that's going to affect, you know, inequality, the council's efforts to reduce inequalities. I noticed that somewhere that was written down, you know, like reduce inequalities as much as possible. So I accept that. But given the fact that in the oft mentioned, and trying not to be, you know, mention this from a political point of view, from the thing that often gets talked about, you know, the councils have been getting less money each year for the last 14 years. And then we're only doing that now, would suggest that was, you know, like that was protected ahead of a lot of other things over the last, you know, 13, 14 years. And it'll be 15 years next year. But there's obviously a few savings that are making their way onto this year's budget. So I don't know if there is, you know, like an order of priority given to, like, you know, what do we want to do last? But there'll be a pile of things that fit that cat, you know, because we're only doing this year. So if what I want to know is if things improve from an income point of view, like to be fair, we've got a wee bit more money like 2 or 3 years ago, and you know, well, it was a couple of years we've got a bit more money than this year, and then, you know, I think it's like 4 years ago. If something like that happens again, which ones will it enable us to cross off, you know, from a savings point of view? And I totally accept that, you know, because of the timing of these savings, that they're all ones that are viewed as being, you know, really, really hard decisions to make, awful decisions to make, but, you know, it's felt there's no choice. But it was just to sort of get a feel for what would need to happen for us not to do that next year. Or for all the things, not just that one, but that's the one that really, that's the one that's got the biggest flashing light from a reducing inequalities from that point.
I understand. Councillor Dacre?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is that the reason we only set the budget, strictly speaking, for this year is because the landscape is simply too uncertain to be sure about what we might be doing next year. So years 2 and 3 are indicative. Something like the council tax reduction scheme cannot take place without this review, and therefore you have to think about it a year in advance of when you might want to do it. I don't think anybody is now going to, at this stage, will give you any sort of ranking on what decisions we might make next year, because we just don't know what things are going to be like. So I'm afraid that's sounds very much like a politician's answer, but I think that's the reality of it, is things are just too uncertain for us to start making that kind of ranking. I mean, we might all have our personal preferences and views, which is fine, but to get anybody to commit to anything now is just not practicable.
Right, okay. I mean, the one thing that I'd maybe hope that you meant, instead of things that we would want to do, it would be things that we feel as if we've got no choice to do, but we don't want to do them.
Yeah, Becky?
Thanks. Yeah, I guess just to kind of remind Scrutiny in terms of the budget proposals and what will be presented to council is to set a budget for the whole. We are setting the full budget of expenditure of over £210 million for next year, and all of that expenditure is on things that cover our priorities. So I guess recognising, yes, we are focusing on some of the proposals where there's reductions, but what's left and what we are spending on is still meeting a lot of our priorities, and so I guess that's it's not forgetting about the quantum of investment that Calderdale Council is making in the round, and that overall budget is contributing towards the priorities.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Carr?
Hi, sorry about that. I assume it's my internet and not you just telling me to move on by by kicking me off. So I'll speak quickly in case. It was just, and I don't know if it's a comment or question, I was alluding to before about the end-to-end nature of some of the decisions, and it's some of the reductions, and say I particularly noticed in the youth services are only sustainable if we do kind of think it through end to end. And I know I appreciate Councillor Dacre, you kind of came back at this at the workshop we had, that some of those things are impossible to know who's going to pick things up. So I guess it was just a comment on my concerns that how much might slip through the net if we only go one step at a time.
Yeah. Is there a response on that one, or?
I think it's a comment really, rather than a comment, and I just think, as you say, we discussed at the workshop the downsides of some of the decisions that we're having to make, that they open up risks, and we can't be fully sure how those can be, that there are possible paths to mitigate those risks, but they are still risks.
Yeah. Good. Next point, thriving towns. Nope. Next point, inequalities in the report. Is there any comments on that? No. Next point is climate. Any queries on that? Nope. Next point is gain share. That's on page 6 of the report. Nope. Next point is income generation. Anything on that topic? And then finally, the conclusion, and I don't imagine there's any comments on there either. Councillor Dacre?
Sorry, I'm not reading as fast as I should. Just about under the income generation, I did write, I think I did send emails to the people who'd raised some of those points with an explanation of why they were not as attractive as they immediately appeared.
Yeah. So we've finished the first half of the discussion. The second half is there anything in addition to what is in the report, any questions you want addressing, anything which isn't in the report, which you want in the report? Are there any questions, comments from members? Councillor Kingston?
I'm just coming back to what I said at the last budget seminar about the at the AHSC's like speed dating event that we had. There were some of the people that we spoke to there had ideas themselves about things that we could do in Calderdale to make savings, council budgets, investment and savings. And it just left me wondering how much is done to talk to staff, council staff, not just directors, but people actually working in our services to investigate any ideas that they have about where we need to say, where we could make savings, where we could make investments. How much are they involved in the budget process?
Is that Councillor Dacre?
Well, I think we did touch upon this, didn't we, in the workshop? All members of staff, it's a pretty open council, is Calderdale, members of staff have regular, or are supposed to have regular, what are called shared conversations with managers, where it's not just a performance appraisal review, it's literally a conversation. And if there are things that you think are not being done in a sort of ship-shaped fashion, that's one of the best opportunities and times to raise it. We do also consult every year as a rule with the unions, who can obviously also raise matters that have been raised by staff with them. That staff know very well that they are free to participate in the budget process themselves. We have a budget Q&A with staff, especially for them, which Becky and Robin and Jackie from HR and OD were on, and that was very well attended this year. Questions and ideas, because yes, those questions from people who are working in some of the affected areas and have ideas. So I think they are well involved. It's bad grammar, I think, but they are. It's made clear to staff that they can be involved, and they do get involved.
Thank you.
Becky?
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, I guess at a team service level, each year we do service business plans, and that's the opportunity to for services to have a look at how their services are operating, what the priorities are, whether that's for improvement or transformation, looking at sector and and that's like with the culture of Calderdale, there are conversations and engagement, and that does involve teams in, and we are a learning organisation, so lots of the services do look outward to sort of get best practice and kind of check. So not all that comes through in business plans and sort of links to other strategies. So there's always those opportunities for efficiencies and improvements and different ways of doing things through those conversations, and then also through our staff networks. That's another opportunity where just general comments and observations could be fed back through those staff networks.
Very good. Councillor Carney?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was really just looking at the report, the publicly available report through, like I say, a resident size. You know, the Appendix 1. You know, it talks about meeting on the 12th of December, and then the meeting on the 23rd of January, and it sort of like lists. You know, like it's got all those tables with questions and things like that on them. So, like, is there going to be a mechanism where the answers to those questions are going to be made available to anyone who's interested, who sees those tables and might wonder, well, what's the answer to that question or this question or whatever? So it's just really looking at through a resident size.
Is your response to that one? Councillor Dacre?
To be frank, I think the answer is probably no, there isn't a formal mechanism to answer those some of those questions that get raised. If people contact me, for instance, or with a query, but a comment, then I'd pass the comment on to the budget consultation, and I would then probably take up the question that they had. But I think if they write it on the sheet, I don't think anybody then goes through and sits down and responds to all of those. And that is something that, if I'm right about that, we probably should take up, because I don't think when it was put together, it was probably not anticipated that people would ask questions, but that they would make comments. And if they're actually asking questions, then I don't think, and it could be quite time consuming, but I don't think there's a mechanism for answering them.
Yeah. Mike?
So the Appendix 1 was the document that the officers, me and Ben and Libby produced after the 12th of December. And the questions, if anything, were prompts for the session on the 23rd of January. So that was the opportunity, I think, to have those discussions. And one of the things that you may want to review next month when you review this process is that we set a structure for the session on the 23rd of January. I thought the 23rd of January was a really good session, but it didn't follow the structure we'd set, and it probably suggests the structure was wrong. So we had, and I think Councillor Dacre may have made this point on the 23rd of January, that we had a series of headings that we jumped straight into some of the individual schemes. So it may be that structure didn't work very well, even though we got some good discussion on the 23rd of January. And as a consequence, some of those questions weren't answered at that session. And I would suggest that I would agree with Councillor Dacre that for this year's process, that moment has probably passed. But it's one to look at how we could do it better next year.
Yeah, I'm aware Becky's got a hand up as well.
Yeah, I guess just, I suppose, for clarity, because it's to give context of the work behind the scenes that Scrutiny have done, isn't it? And so maybe if you call them rather than budget questions, maybe it was lines of inquiry, wasn't it, from the 12th of December to prompt, to stimulate the conversation. So maybe if you call it lines of inquiry that came out of the 12th of December to inform the discussion, I guess it doesn't indicate that those answers necessarily. It is just they're the sorts of areas that Scrutiny across, collectively were sort of considering and debating, as opposed to necessarily having the answers. Suggestion.
Yeah. All right, Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed that well, it's been all over the newspapers as well, but it's in the budget, in the cabinet papers for Monday, about the discussion for the funding. Let me just put it up quickly so I get it right. The funding of infrastructure to support the delivery of development in the South East Calderdale. Will this commence in the new budget year? Because I am fully aware that the proposals are that it's going to be something like 32 to 35 million over a period of years. Is that going to be incorporated into the upcoming budget? Or will it be? And what sort of how is that going to affect outcomes as far as achieving that balanced budget? Thank you.
Yeah, Becky.
Do you want me to respond to that quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so in respect of getting the investment approved on the capital programme, the impact on revenue won't have an impact on the budget for 24-25. So that's why the report kind of says that it will need considering, and it's in full. The full costs of the investment and the borrowing will be met over time by the Section 106 that will be met through the roof tariffs, but that will be closely monitored in terms of the points at which expenditure starts to happen with all of those various infrastructure projects and the timing, and then we'll manage that through the way that we manage our treasury management. So it's not anticipated that there will be a revenue impact in 24-25, hence why it's not included in the budget proposals, and it will be considered as part of our cash flow and borrowing in future years.
Thank you. If I may come back with a supplementary just very quickly. So are we expecting over the longer term for that to be a cost neutral exercise then? I say exercise.
Over the period it's anticipated that it's cost neutral. There'll just be cash flow differences that and that's why the borrowing is needed in advance of the income streams, but it will need close monitoring.
Yes, appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yep. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go back to the point that Councillor Kingston raised. Actually, I think it's an important point. I think it's something that perhaps scrutiny should look at, is the involvement of council staff. I think going back to the adult social care speed dating night, that runs off the tongue, doesn't it? That really runs off the tongue. But it was a really good night. But I think I got a feeling with speaking to some people, and I think this is where maybe Councillor Kingston come from. There's some frustration. That either ideas weren't being picked up or ideas were being picked up but slowly, and the time it took to deliver them. And maybe it's something we need to look at from a scrutiny perspective as to how that operates, how it runs, how it's picked up, and whether there can be some improvements in that. Because I think we all recognise on here, and Becky and Councillor Dacre have already said it. Staff who are doing the job will often give you a good assessment and will come up with some good and bright ideas. We just need to make sure that they deliver. I understand all that, but it is something to pick up on. So it might be worth the appropriate scrutiny committee make a recommendation going to them, and that might be us. I don't know to look at that going forward.
Yeah, Mike.
I saw Mike come off mute, so I thought he was going to launch in and shoot me down in flames there.
It is indeed this scrutiny board, Chair. Councillor Barnes is absolutely right. He's made more work for himself.
I was going to volunteer the deputy chair for doing this personally.
Well, I'm quite happy to make a note of that anyway. I second that proposal. Right, fine. I've just got a question, if I may, on the budget proposals. There was a saving attributed, I think not next year, but the year after, for the disposal of the Shay. Are there any? Could we have some more information on that? Where are we? Is there any demand indeed for the disposal? Yeah, Councillor Dacre.
Well, I think that's a bit of a strange question. Is there any demand for it? The update on it really is that talks have started with both clubs, because the preferred option of the council is that the Shay is disposed of by some form of transfer to both clubs who work together to further the interests of both clubs and hopefully have access to funds that we don't have and freedom to do as they want with the asset. So those, as you can imagine, are quite delicate discussions. We don't want to keep a running commentary upon them. And I think I said in the public Q&A that we did that I just hope that the fans of both clubs will get behind their clubs and that the clubs do really try positively to work together, because I know that in the past the relationships haven't always been easy, and I do understand it's difficult when two clubs of different sport share a stadium, but that's where we're at. That's our preferred option. We've started the discussions. The clubs have reacted positively. They're keen to explore the possibilities and keen to work with us to do it and can see benefits for themselves.
It's interesting. So there's a saving of 140k attributed. Does that create a capital receipt as well?
Well, that would depend on the nature of the disposal.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm not in any way suggesting that this is what will happen or that it's the appropriate mechanism, but you know that when we do community asset transfers, we don't get a capital receipt. So not all disposals give rise to a capital receipt.
Yeah. You can tell my worries there when we don't produce we're essentially selling an asset and not producing a receipt from the sale of that asset. I appreciate you.
We wouldn't be selling if it were a community asset transfer is not a sale. And the asset and community asset transfers are done on the basis. I mean, again, I'm not saying that this would be an appropriate vehicle, but they're done where there is a community asset, which a community organisation can add something to by running it, and that's for the good of the whole community. And as you've indicated, that the saving that we're trying to make here is in our revenue budget. We're not looking there in that case at the capital budget. So all these things have to be weighed up. It's also possible to see that you could simply decide that you were going to sell that amount of that land for the best possible price to gain the greatest capital receipt. At the moment, that is not the preferred option of the council. The council want to find a mechanism to enable both clubs to remain there together, and that is likely to mean that we don't maximise a capital receipt. But this is all at a very early stage.
Yeah, it's at an embryonic stage. I think it's something that we'll want to keep tabs on. What's the current arrangement in terms of the share? Is it leased, or is it, leased on a peppercorn rent, or
to the clubs, you mean?
Yeah.
No.
But I mean, so is it rented? So it's rented to them then, the space for each game?
No. I mean, I'm not really sure that I want to get into this discussion at the moment, Councillor Robinson. I don't think it's necessarily appropriate, perhaps, to start talking about some of these things. I'm happy to talk to you offline, perhaps, about it rather than now.
Yeah. It's an interesting one.
Helpful at this stage.
It goes back to Councillor Barnes's point that he made earlier about the detail which is lacking in the report. I mean, they're all valid questions to ask. when indeed it's a proposal. But I agree, we can take it offline without a problem, and you know, I can fully understand the position here on that. So yeah, we can take it offline. But I think it's a very valid line of inquiry when it's in a budget proposal.
I suppose what I'd say is that you have a figure there for what the saving would be. So whatever sits behind all of that, that's what it's costing the council. And that's the saving we're looking to make. And you might also think that some years there might be other costs, if there are extra costs that come along in relation to the pitch, for instance, that might not be there in the regular budget.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And the other reason why, you know, I get concerned about proposals like this is just because this is an income generator. It's an opportunity. You know, it's an opportunity to actually host space for corporate businesses, for anyone who wants to rent space for functions. You know, so I just get concerned when I see things like this. And this is just an observation, by the way. But in some ways, it reduces the options available to us as a council to bring in income. And that's just why I get concerned when I see things like this. But, you know, of course, it's one that we'll need to explore. Yeah.
I suppose, again, I'd say in relation to that that's what it's costing us. Yes, it has space to hire out, but there's lots of places hiring space out. The primary purpose of a council is not and as an event space manager, it's to provide other public services. And there's a lot of competition out there. And it's a criticism that's heard from the clubs that we don't make the most of it sometimes. And it may be that they can make a better job of running it. But assuming that money is always to be made from conferences is not always a valid assumption. And I then go back to the point that we are not primarily an events manager. That's not where we want to put our energies. And it's costing us £140,000 a year.
Yeah. In that case, one of my long-held beliefs as well is that more can be made of the Victoria Theatre. And we look at the Peace Hall model, you know, not like you just said, the council is not an event space manager. You look at the Peace Hall model, this thriving trust who are now making the most of that space. My question to you is there any possibility or is there any cost saving that could be attributed towards, you know, a trust model, a trust running the Victoria Theatre, given that the council are not an event space manager?
I think you may recall at the time of the future council, various possibilities were put forward for the Victoria Theatre because it was subject to subsidy and we were looking for savings, and there were a number of options in there, one of which was handing it over to a trust to run. At the moment, public services have not put that forward for this year's budget as in any for any option for either disposal or trust or anything. So I'm satisfied that at the moment public services and the section that run the Victoria Theatre are doing so sufficiently successfully that it doesn't need to be looked at in terms of cuts. But if things were to change, then yes, we'd have to reconsider. but at the moment it's not there as an option.
That's interesting, because I know that certain bodies would be very interested in taking the Victoria Theatre forward. And indeed, in terms of offering for the theatre and for the people of Halifax and Calderdale, I'd be very interested in seeing what external partners could offer there and what they could bring to the theatre. And in some ways, it could be a bit of a weight lifted off the shoulders of council officers. Councillor Carney?
Yeah, I mean, I was just sort of wondering if, I mean, I'd imagine that the Victoria Theatre's kind of like got its own staff, and they, you know, they must be pretty capable of managing the space, managing the maintenance, and you know, and all that sort of stuff. Because I mean, it seems to be a fairly successful part of the council. You don't. There's nothing on the budget that talks about, you know, having to bail it out in any way or anything like that. So I mean, to me, that, I mean, it's only getting provoked by what you're saying just now, Councillor Robinson. But if it's not, you know, my head's kind of saying, if it's not broke, why look to fix it?
From memory, there is a cost saving attached to the disposal of the Victoria Theatre, in whatever way that disposal looks, you know. But there is a cost saving attached to that. But it might be one for further investigation. Mike?
Just, Chair, that Becky's put a suggestion in chat that you've already passed a recommendation about, excuse me, about the cultural offer, and this discussion could be folded into that recommendation for Place Scrutiny Board to pick up when it looks at the cultural offer as a whole, assuming Place Scrutiny Board, Councillor Dickinson agrees to pick it up.
Yeah, tie it in with that discussion. That's fine. If Councillor Dickinson is agreeable. Is there anything? Yeah, sorry, Councillor Dacre.
Well, I was just going to say that I know people are very keen when the Year of Culture set off that sport should be included as part of the Year of Culture, because for many people that is their culture. And I think a comparison to some degree between sports, the Shay, and other cultural offerings might be something you'd want to consider in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good suggestion.
Their reach and their audiences and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. We can. Don't think we need to amend the recommendation, but certainly we can have it reflected in the minutes that we'd like that discussion to encompass those areas. Good. Any further comments or anything from members? No. In that case, I know there's a vote that we'll need to, Mike, if I'm just to clarify, we need to vote this through, in which case, in order to take it to Cabinet, essentially. Is that correct?
Yes, I think, Chair, you've voted through, you've gone through the recommendations in bold in the report one by one. So I think we've got those with the amendments in our notes, but I think the recommendation should be that you accept this report as amended in your discussion, and it's sent on to Cabinet. Ben, Libby, and myself will amend the report tomorrow morning, following all the notes we've got and following your comments, and send it through via committee services to Cabinet, so they've got it as soon as possible to consider on Monday afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to propose that. Can we have a seconder, please?
Second.
Yeah, Councillor. What capacity are you on the board? Are you?
I'm a fully fledged junior member.
Yeah. Oh, you are actually. Yes, because you.
Yes. We swapped out. Okay. Yeah. I'm not just up for just wandering over for fun.
No, of course. Yeah, I was just double checking because I wanted to make sure. Okay. I'll propose Councillor Dickinson to second. All those in favour, please. Okay, and that's carried. So that will be going to Cabinet in that case, I believe, next week. Good. Okay. On that note, thank you to, I think we've still got another item, but thank you to Councillor Dacre and to Becky for attending the meeting, and thank you for your efforts today. I know it's not just been this meeting, it's been a series of meetings. So thank you for your efforts over the past few months. They are appreciated. So thank you. Good. On to the work programme. Ben?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to give a quick update on the work programme for March, I've obviously noted the recommendation from the meeting tonight, and I'll liaise with yourself and Deputy Chair about how to implement that effectively and discuss exactly what you would like to come to that meeting. Members should also be advised that we're liaising with West Yorkshire Joint Services about bringing an item from them to the Scrutiny Board in March, which I'm finalising at the moment, which they're responsible for things such as trading standards, the archive for Yorkshire, and so on and so forth. And the council does make a contribution to their running costs, so it's important that we have a look at that. And as always, if any members have any items they'd like to put on the work programme or ideas for detailed reviews, if they drop me, Mike or Libby an email, we can set up a meeting and discuss with them in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Any comments on the work programme, members? And
I believe Councillor Sutherland's got his hand up.
Oh no. No. Mike.
I just wanted to make, it's not really about the work programme. I should have said this earlier in the meeting. Just a reminder for future meetings that anything you say in chat can't be seen by the public. And this is a meeting in public. So I think we strayed a little bit this evening into putting discussion that should be in public in the chat. And that includes Cabinet and Director as well. So we'll be issuing a general reminder that just remember that were we in Committee Room B, the public would be sat in the seats at the back and they'd hear all this. So it's just a reminder to people.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And also from like an inclusivity perspective, it's, you know, it's not great putting comments in chat because sometimes it's quite difficult to focus on the debate when you're reading MSN messages. Councillor Carney.
Yeah, I was just sort of wondering there was a bit of an update on, I'd made a suggestion about looking at sort of like debt collection with regards to council tax and stuff. I was sure that sort of appeared on a previous report as something that we were looking at, but
yep. Can I just jump in, Councillor Kenny, if you're okay? I'm in discussions with Becky and Sarah Richardson about how to develop that as an item, and that is moving forward. It almost certainly won't be not in this municipal year, but in next municipal year. But it's certainly something I've got scheduled meetings about to develop the scope of the item and my intention is to be in touch with you about that once I've got more of the scoping done.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Thanks very much.
Perfect. And the final thing from me was everyone happy with the budget process this year? And are there any recommendations for improvements? Or obviously the budget process, it's changed substantially from last year. Are there any comments, Councillor Dickinson?
Yeah, thank you. I thought the process this year allowed us to be a little bit more incisive and analytical. There was a general feeling on the evening that you couldn't make it, was it the 23rd of January, that the process could in fact start even earlier with a greater degree of involvement of members on a wider basis. Because it was Councillor Barnes actually who made the point that, when it comes to, no, it was a good point. I'm glad you made it. that you know, there are ideas are presented in opposition party budgets which cannot, you know, be sort of really incorporated into the administration's budget, because they're voted down or voted for in whole, rather than sort of cherry picking the good bits and then sticking them on. Because you know, the point being is that going through this process and allowing, for example, proposals to be accepted from other parties and adopted, it gives us an opportunity really to be more fully involved in that process, because as I mentioned at the time, none of us really want to see this council fail. And yeah, bits that do get included or don't get included give opportunities for the political knockabout anyway. It sounded to me like this was a good idea. Councillor Dacre sounded very much in favour of it at the time, if I recall rightly, and there are enough people over here who can back me up on that. So I think what you've started this year, George, has the potential to move forward in a really positive way. So you know, I'd like to salute you in that part of that process and the role you played in that. And the scope moving forward, I think particularly has scope to be really quite exciting, and yet still gives us scope not only to work collectively, but also gives us enough difference at the end of the day to disagree and argue, which is what we like doing best, of course, as councillors.
I think that's very kind, but I must be absolutely modest here, and this process has very little to do with me. The main people in charge are Mike and Ben, and I want to.
And can I just add Libby? Can I just add Libby, Chair?
And Libby to that as well. And I want to survey my gratitude to the scrutiny team for everything they've done throughout this process. You know, we can't imagine the amount of effort which is required when producing tonight's report, and indeed actually not just the little things, arranging the meetings, you know, take absolutely ages, and getting everyone in the same room. It's all a huge endeavour. So I think we should really say thank you to the scrutiny team for their efforts and their assistance. And you know, only a minor part of the success is attributed to us as councillors. The majority is actually the scrutiny team. So I want to thank them.
I'd like to amend my comments accordingly in that case.
Yeah, and if we could note that on the minutes, that would be,
yes, please,
that'd be appreciated. Perfect, good. And if there's nothing else, in that case, have a good one. Thank you for coming, and keep well, and see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
See you later. Bye.
Night, everyone.
Night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.